You're listening to a Monster Kid podcast.
Hi and welcome to A Dingo Ate My Movie, a podcast that features classic Ozploitation and other slightly left of centre and overlooked Australian films from the 70s, 80s and beyond. Today I'm joined again by Brandon from Varicon Video and the Gory Picture Show to talk about Tony Williams' haunting Next of Kin from 1982.
Remember him when you look at the night sky.
After her mother's death, Linda returns to Montclair, a retirement home that has been in the family for many years and which she has inherited. Upon her return, she uncovers a mystery lurking within its walls that makes Linda a pawn in a very dangerous game. The film stars Jackie Karen as Linda, John Jarratt as Barney, Alex Scott as Dr. Barton, and Gerda Nicholson as Connie. It's directed by Tony Williams and was released in 1982. All right, good morning, Brandon. How are you, mate?
I'm great. How are you, Pete?
I'm really, really good. It's great having you back again. And
I thought you'd be sick of me by now.
Oh, not quite, not quite. Yeah, never really get sick of my guests. It's always really good having everyone back on. It's great fun.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Today we're going to have a chat about Next of Kin from 1982, which I'm really excited about. This is a really fun movie for me. I really like this movie a lot. I watched it during Halloween, and even leading up to this episode, I thought, oh, it's going to be fun. I get to watch it again. So I really, really enjoy this movie. It's got an interesting history. It's a good watch, and it's kind of like, to me, it's a mix of genres.
Oh, sure, yeah. And I can definitely see it being a great Halloween movie.
Yeah, it worked really well as a Halloween movie. It's fantastic. So this is a really interesting movie, right? If you haven't watched it, I would almost say to you, watch it before you listen to the rest of the episode, because it's kind of different. So to me, this is a movie that starts out as almost like a ghost. You would think it's almost a ghost story of some sort. And then it just turns into a slasher movie effectively.
Yeah. It's a very significant tonal shift about halfway through the movie where it starts, you can tell it's becoming something else. And all of our expectations are subverted and we really have no sense of where we're headed. And I like that. So we're very, our expectations are upended.
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot of weird stuff goes on, and there's a lot of strange imagery that sometimes, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's really, really great for the movie. So what are your initial thoughts?
This is a great slow burn, and I love a slow burning plot. And at times, and maybe this was just my experience, but it feels like the film runs the risk of losing us at a few times, but then something happens and it draws us back in. So we're puzzling over, okay, does that matter? Is that significant in any way? So there's a lot of red herrings here. And I like that we're baited with the suggestion of the supernatural. Like we're expecting maybe that's going to pay off in some way, but also the suggestion of menace, of being watched, wondering what's real, what's imagined. And this is a pretty tight movie. I mean, it's 90 minutes and there's a lot thrown in our way to decipher, and we're putting the pieces together with Linda. And so it feels like it's a more of a cooperative experience. You know, we're playing detective and digging up the past with Linda, and the cinematography is just, a chef's kiss. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really shot well. My favorite shot, and we'll probably talk about it again at some stage, is that shot where she's near the end of the movie where she's running down that hall and the camera is above her, and it's just a fantastic sort of shot. And then the piece with the cat and all that sort of stuff. Just It's just
Great cat acting.
very good cat acting, yeah. If I was to sit someone down to watch this movie and didn't show them the trailer, I reckon they'd think they were watching some sort of atmospheric haunted house sort of mystery. And it's really not until we get into the final 20 minutes of the film, really, that you realize you're kind of watching like a slasher/thriller sort of film.
Right.
In my opinion, it has real shades of like a classic sort of haunted house sort of feel.
Yeah.
You've got all these ghostly visions and all these things that happen, and she's reading from the diary, and we're getting all this background, and then we just basically have someone that's out to kill her to get what's hers, sort of thing.
Yeah, I love those great like gothic overtones, especially in the first half or 3/4 of the film.
It really is a great film like that. I think the performances are really good. Interesting that Jackie Karen I don't remember seeing her in much else.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with her. But no, she's great. She's great here.
So the director was Tony Williams. He was primarily known as an editor, a commercial editor, director, and he was a documentary filmmaker when this film was made. And he only had one previous feature, which was called Solo. And once this sort of failed, because it kind of flopped for a lot of reasons, he went back to documentary filmmaking, and I think he's still directing commercials, but he hasn't made another feature film, which is interesting, right?
Yeah. I was really surprised because, I mean, this has such a signature feel to it that it's just incredible that we didn't get a larger body of work from him.
The way that the film was kind of lost for a few years, I think, is really the thing. It was kind of like it was filmed. The company that filmed it, I think, went broke, and then they just had, it wasn't till this is another movie that Quentin Tarantino kind of discovered on a VHS that was given to him by somebody, and he started showing it to people, and then eventually they found the originals and restored it, and that's what we ended up with. So.
Yeah, it's interesting how like a cult following develops, decades after its original release, and probably a lot of that has to do with the cachet that carries over from Tarantino. But because Quentin Tarantino says it's great, then we must check it out. But I think that is not necessarily why people like it. I think it's simply I think it just takes a big name like that to legitimize, I guess, something of this caliber that suggests that, hey, we should maybe revisit this and see if we still appreciate it.
Yeah, it definitely stands on its own, but it is, obviously that when somebody like that says this is a great film, people are going to watch it, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So the producers weren't interested at all in making a thoughtful film. They just wanted to make sure they got their money, really. So they asked Williams asked for more time to flesh out the script, and they said no. They said, no, we just want the film released on time and on budget, and they don't care about the content, which is pretty typical for a lot of these exploitation films, right? It was all about investors getting their tax breaks and getting their money back on their investment. They didn't really give a shit about what the other one was like.
We just want to make a profit.
That's movies in general, though, right?
Right.
The mansion they used for the exterior shots was... I think it's called Overnewton Castle in Victoria. So these days it's primarily used as a wedding venue and has high tea once a month, which would be fantastic. I'd love to go to Victoria one year and go to high tea there. It'd be it'd be great.
Tell me, Pete, tell me what high tea is.
High tea it's very British, I think. And I'll probably get this wrong, and some of my British listeners can pick me up on this at a later date. It's effectively like you get together. I think it's something... I don't want to sound sexist. It's definitely something women do more than men, right? Mm-hmm. You would sit down and you would have tea, as in drinking tea, and you would have kind of like some pastries or some biscuits or some scones or something like that with it. And it's all very elegantly kind of produced and staged, and uses beautiful bone china and these beautiful plates, and it's all very posh and things like that. It's something I could never see myself doing.
But it sounds like something you should at least try once.
I'd say so, yeah. And like I said, please feel free to correct me on Twitter or wherever if you know what high tea really is, and I don't really know what it is. But that's what I see, because I've never done one. Would have no clue. I've only seen it on TV and people talking about it. But that's what I see as a high tea, and you can have it in. There's places that have it. Like some hotels have it. Some more upscale hotels will have high tea occasionally, or once a week or every day or something like that. So yeah, it's usually done in places like this place that they shot this film would definitely be a perfect location for high tea.
Oh, sure.
Because it's got that old style, and it's an old English thing, which, us being a nation of convicts, obviously we kind of follow after that a little bit. So yeah, it's pretty good. So Williams intended the last scene of the film to be one long take with the camera panning around the truck to the explosion as the final shot. The bit where Linda's driving away at the end of the film.
Oh, yeah.
And the film's grip built a special crane to accomplish that, and the crew rehearsed it for a week so they make sure they got the timing right. At the last minute, unfortunately, the video screen for the crew member that was responsible for setting off the explosion lost power or something, and he had to guess when to set off the explosion. So he got it a little bit wrong, and the explosion was reflected in the truck window.
Yeah.
And the pan caught the end of it when they panned around. They caught the end of the explosion and the second explosion, but it wasn't what they wanted. They actually wanted it to pan around and then the explosion. But audiences and critics actually praised Williams for the shot because of the fact that there was the reflection in the car of like the explosion, and in the window you saw like the orange.
Right.
And then as it turned around, you saw the final explosion, and they were saying that was fantastic and it was a really great artistic choice.
Yeah.
And he thought it was quite funny that people, thought that, and he was quite happy that it ended up the way it did. So one of those classic happy accidents, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I remember when I watched it, there was a reflection also in one of the street signs as she's driving past, and as the camera is pulling back, like it just kind of previews the explosion, and it's very effective, and it is very unusual, but I think that's why it works so well and why it's so memorable.
Absolutely. If you didn't know that story, you would think it was all set up that way.
Exactly.
Right? The film went out to a few festivals, and it got he got a Best Director prize at one festival. But because he was never told that the films were being shown at festivals, he never attended any of them. Oh. So he was kind of directed this film and then just kind of was, out of the loop.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, yeah.
Which would be pretty disappointing if you're a director. I think you'd want to be able to, to enjoy getting those accolades for something you worked hard on.
Yeah, I wonder if he's still alive.
I think he is. You can have a bit of a look and see.
Yeah, I'll look real quick. Yeah, he's 79.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. A couple of years younger than my dad. So.
Yeah, I wonder what he thinks of, I guess, the contemporary response to this film now.
I think he'd be quite proud of it.
Absolutely.
I listened to the commentary not recently, but I listened to it previously. I think he's still pretty proud of the film and how it turned out. So he's not one of these people, I don't think, that sort of disowns it.
Good.
Which is good. So the distribution company, and this I guess is where it ties into the last thing as well. The distribution company went bankrupt as soon as or shortly after the film was finished, and the rights got caught up amongst the companies against all the frozen assets of the company as it wound up. So the film never really got a theatrical release at all, which is why I think it's so unknown, or has been so unknown. And then Quentin Tarantino got a bootleg copy on VHS that had found its way to him. It had been, you know what it was like looking at old VHS tapes. I think you do, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
When they've been watched a million times, and you've got the what is it? All the tracking issues, and you have to muck around with the little tracking knob, and it's just stuff. I still remember that. And it found its way to Quentin Tarantino. He compared it to The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Can you see the parallels there at all?
I can see some, and I've heard him mention that before in interviews. And yeah, I think tonally, like just the strangeness of it is evocative enough to make comparisons or parallels or draw parallels to The Shining. But also there's this sense of mystery around the place, like the location itself, and this kind of greater history that's bubbling to the surface in very strange and unique ways. And so that might also play into it. The Shining is also a slow burn that it's much longer, of course, than Next of Kin. But I mean, just think about The Shining and how it's all building up to that massive climax, and it becomes much more frantic, and the sense of urgency is really ramped up. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels we could draw there.
And according to Williams, that Tarantino's interest in the film actually helped it get released on DVD originally. And that brings us to the next part, which is, where did you watch this?
I watched it in two places. I watched it on Shudder, but I also watched it on the Umbrella Blu-ray.
It's probably the same Blu-ray I've got.
Yeah, it's a great transfer. It's very, very crisp, and you can tell they didn't do a lot of like digital noise reduction, so you can still see the film grain, and colors look really balanced. Yeah,
it looks really good, and you know, I always talk about those guys, but that's really more about the fact that most of the movies I talk about on this show come from them,
right?
But, they do great work on this, and I think I watched it when I was doing my last viewing of it. I wanted to take notes and wanted my computer close by. I just watched it on Shudder as well. So it's been on Shudder for a while. So it's really good to actually see some local films on Shudder that are, you know, a bit older and a bit, hopefully a good spot for it, a good place for it, for people to discover it and enjoy it. And if you've got Shudder, it's definitely worth a look.
Yeah, it was even featured on The Last Drive-In on Shudder.
It was apparently. Was that a couple of months ago, or was it a while ago? Because
that might have been last year.
Yeah, because that show is weird in Australia. So, for instance, the recent ones, well, I guess not The Last Drive-In, but those Elvira specials they did. Mm-hmm. There was 4, right? Yeah. So there was, the first one was her movie, Mistress of the Dark, or whatever it was called, right? We didn't get that because they don't have rights for that here.
Oh no!
But we got the second 3, and with all the Joe Bob stuff on Shudder, we sometimes get the movie and his bit. Mm-hmm. Sometimes all we get is like all his bits. We don't get the movies, so
that's a bummer.
It's kind of weird. It's very well. I just switch on a VPN if I really want to watch. It's kind of, but it's the usual thing with rights, right? If someone else has the rights to it here, they can't really show it. I just find it odd that some of these movies that are not really well known are tied up in all sorts of rights. You would think they'd be a bit easier to get a hold of. You had a note about music.
Yeah. I wanted to get your thoughts on the music, especially the music that plays over the opening titles. Like, it's very percussive. It's got a pretty cool drum sound, and we get more of that throughout the film. But I think it complements the synthy string stuff and like the arpeggiated bit parts throughout. I just wanted to see what you thought about the music.
Yeah, it's. I love the way the music in this film sort of builds a lot of the suspense and gives you a lot of the atmosphere. I think it adds to a lot of the atmosphere. The part you're talking about with like I think there's originally like just that very slow drum part.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a pulsing sort of heartbeat sort of thing. And you hear that motive, I think, a couple of times in the movie. And it's just, it just adds a lot to the movie. There's a lot of atmosphere. It's really well done. It's not over the top. It's enough that it just kind of keeps you in the movie. It doesn't sort of, sometimes a lot of music can be over the top and really take you out of the movie. Mm-hmm. But when music is used really well in film like this, I think it really makes a great addition. And in this one, it's just really, really good, and I enjoyed it. It's got some weird stuff near the end. The scene I talked about before when she's sort of running down the hall. The music in that sort of section is really good. It's not a lot of the music you would expect. It's a lot of those. I think there's a lot of. I have to think back, but it's a lot of. Sounds like picking of violin strings and
things
like that. And it sounds great. It's really got a great soundscape.
Yeah, soundscape, I think is the right word, because, I mean, we could also we could also refer back to The Shining, and there are those really bizarre moments where the music is not necessarily melodic in any way. It's just kind of this frenzied, this clustering of all these strange, articulations of like strings and stuff like that. Where it's not musical in any way. It's just almost a surreal, unnatural sound.
It's different enough. Like I could see another. So if we had someone like a Brian May, for instance, who writes great soundtracks as well, I think his interpretation would be completely different to what we get here, and probably a little bit more commercial's probably the wrong word, but probably a little bit more traditional in regards to the sort of movie soundtrack. Whereas this one's kind of quite different and really makes it sound. The sound is fantastic.
Yeah, that's much more like experimental kind of vibe to it.
Very much so. Yeah. So we'll have a bit of a chat about the scenes, and we'll just have a bit of a general chat about the movie. I think lots of interesting stuff. I was going to talk about one of the characters I love in this. We didn't call out, and I can't remember the actor's name. Is Lance, the old guy?
Right. Yeah, I like.
It's Lance, isn't it? Is that his name?
Lance. Yeah.
His character is fantastic, and I like the fact that he's in this movie. He has a connection with Linda. He knew her mother. To me, he's a really good character actor in this, the guy who does this.
Yeah. He gets a great introduction in the film, and I feel like as an audience, like we're really interested in him. But then after he has his stroke or whatever, and he's bedridden for such a big part of the movie, and I don't think he really has anything to say beyond that. And so he kind of doesn't have a lot to do. But very early on, like the way they establish him, and he's just kind of, working on the grounds. He's helping with the washing and stuff. And they're caught in the rain. And they have a lot of really great moments between him and Linda. I guess I wanted more of that as the film went on.
Yeah, it kind of grounds the film a little bit, and it shows obviously she's very fond of him and she's known him for a long time, and he's obviously been at that place for a long time. So, hey, really interesting. I love the scene where they're doing the washing and he's taking in the washing, and he's standing outside and he's folding the sheet, and the rain starts coming out. She kind of almost pulls him inside the rotunda or whatever they're in. Yeah, it's quite good.
I like that scene too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the one that picks out the beret out of the pond a bit later on in his pajamas.
Yes. The one scene that I really, really liked is, I guess it's not necessarily a scene, it's more of a sequence, but it's about halfway through the film, and there's this high concentration of scares and eerie imagery. Linda's going through her mother's diary, the power goes out, and she searches the manor with a very large late 70s flashlight, believing someone is lurking around. But a lot of things happen in pretty quick succession. She finds this scary-looking doll. There's this jump scare with the cat. She discovers Mr. Collins' corpse that was discovered earlier in the film, with its eyes open, watching her, which she doesn't seem to be bothered by. And then Mrs. Peterson, one of the people living there, stumbles into the room with her face cream on, and she looks terrifying. But of course, Linda isn't bothered by that either. And she's talking to Barney on the phone, which is interrupted by heavy breathing. Then the sink in the tub flood the bathroom. She has this, and this is a really cool shot too. She has this nightmare of an old man floating outside of her window and knocking on it. And it looks like he was shot underwater. It's a really cool effect. But just all of these different things happening, like I said, in pretty quick succession, this weirdness just creates so much unease, and it disorients us as the viewer. And I just like how unsettling that is, especially since really nothing to that degree has happened up to this point in the film.
Yeah, it's been pretty straight. There's been a few little things, but there is that point, like you were saying, where everything starts to unwind and open up. And that scene where the old lady walks in with the face cream.
Yeah.
In the trailer, they use that, right? And it makes it wonder what's going on, whether it's a ghost or some sort of creature, right? It's just an old woman with some face cream.
Yeah, I thought she was a ghost or something, or a vision. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the bit with Mr. Collins' corpse so early, just to give a bit of context, he's like drowned in the bath. And we think at the start of the movie that he just drowned, but it turns out that he was drowned in the bath. But it's a cool shot when we see it at the start of the movie and he's in the bath and he's drowned in the bath. It's that bit where Lance goes to have his bath.
Right.
And puts his foot down on the guy's head that's in the bath. It's pretty creepy because it makes you think, oh, that'd be sort of quite creepy. But,
yeah. And it's a cool shot from overhead because we just see Mr. Collins' head as it's emerging from the water. And we think that he's rising from the water himself. But then the camera pulls back and we see that he's being pulled out by his arms by other people. So just that little camera trick
cool edit.
Is very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very cool edit because that's what it looks like. Looks he's coming out of the bath. He's being lifted out. And there's the shot where you see him from his head, or the top of his head in the bath, where they actually used a bath but cut the end of it off and put perspex around it to shoot so you could see his head in the bath, the bits where he's under the water. So it's quite cool. But, yeah, that's a good shot. And so he turns up later. I think what's happening in this movie is there's somebody that's trying to get to Linda because they believe they should have ownership of this house, right?
Right.
And it turns out that it's Linda's mother's sister, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they're making all this weird stuff happen and trying to sort of freak her out, and eventually they try and kill her, literally kill her.
Yeah, there's no way for us to really know that all of this has just been a cat and mouse game.
It's quite interesting, but the shot with the cat going down the hall and going into the room and sitting on the body of Mr. Collins.
Right, yeah, it sits on the body. Yeah. You know, it's funny that shot of the cat walking away from the camera. And I know it's a different shot, but it made me think of the one in The Thing with the dog, and it's walking down the hall and it's coming towards the camera and kind of looking into this room and that room, but that's what it made me think of.
Well, the shot you're talking about with the body at the window, like swimming in the window, it reminds me of that shot of, it's not swimming, is that shot in Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot,
the kid outside the window, yeah.
Yeah,
same sort of feel. Yeah, so there's a lot of really, really cool callbacks in a lot of this sort of stuff.
And this isn't, I don't know, I had some trouble like deciding what my other scene was going to be. And this is kind of a throwaway segment, but I'll just dish it out to you anyway. The old folks take a trip. So this manor is populated by, I don't know, how many would you think, Pete? Maybe a dozen, maybe 20?
Dozen? Yeah, 15 to 20 maybe. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And they're all going to take this trip. But I want to mention really quickly just how much I love the cinematography here and the look of this film. I mean, I love the way these 70s and 80s movies look. Just it has this soft picture and almost like halo effect on the highlights. It just looks great, especially the exterior stuff is great. But anyway, like the people who live at the manor, they're loaded onto this bus and they're being carried off for this scenic trip, this outing. And we never see them again. And up to this point, they've just been comic relief to some extent. They've been catty and kind of ornery or irritable people and puzzling over what this portable cassette player is and that sort of thing.
Yes.
But now, I mean, we need them gone for this climax to happen. And so we got to get them out of the movie. I just wanted to get your take on this because it doesn't seem like they serve much of a purpose, like narratively, like to carry the story forward. But yeah, what do you think?
I don't think they serve any purpose narratively. I think they're just there to tell the audience that this is a retirement home of some sort.
Right.
Right. And it's old, and this is what her mother used to do and look after all these people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do. They go on the bus trip, and of course the bus breaks down, so they've been billeted out for the night. I don't know what they meant by billeted out. You would think with adults, especially older adults, they will put them into a motel or something, but billeting out from my past when I was at school and I went away in the school band to Wagga, which is, I don't know, 4.5 hours from Sydney. And we stayed with parents from another school. Like, that's what billeting is, right? Have you ever done that before?
No, I haven't.
So they basically take you we went on the bus to Wagga or wherever it was, and then all these other parents meet us at the school, and it's obviously all pre-organised, and everybody gets to stay with a family, in one or two stay with a family for the weekend or whatever. So it's that to me is what billeting is. So that to me, when I listen to that, it's like what they basically farmed all these old people out to other families to look after. I thought they would just put them in a hotel.
Yeah, especially, like, what if these people needed special care?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think this is what you mean by they don't serve much purpose, right? So we're not supposed to think that they're just out of the way so we can have the climax of the film. We can have an empty house.
Yeah, it would make things a little different if some of those characters provided some exposition or a little bit of history for us. Give us a few more pieces of the puzzle, but they don't really do that.
They don't. We just have a woman that vacuums while the old men are trying to watch TV, and
right,
and the other woman that gets the Walkman from her daughter, and just trying
she
to
has
work
no
it
idea what that is. But I want to mention too that in that scene as they're getting on the bus, one of their, I guess, chaperones, this guy, he has this creepy koala puppet that I wish had come back later in the movie because it looks so damn creepy.
He's kind of doing a voice. It's one of the old blokes getting on the bus says, "Oh, that's not really the koala talking. It's just that guy." It's
great. Yeah,
it's really funny. Yeah, they don't serve a lot of purpose in the movie, but I guess they fill it out and give it a bit of color and
right. Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I appreciate that.
It's odd though that like somehow Linda's auntie, who ends up trying to kill her, right, didn't go on that trip. So what was her excuse, right? So
yeah, a little bit of a plot hole there.
Yeah, because what's his name? The old guy that had the stroke.
Oh, Lance.
So Lance doesn't go on the bus trip because he's had a stroke. Fair enough, that's fine. But I don't know how Linda's auntie gets out of it because it seems like everyone went, but obviously she found some way around it.
Yeah, they don't really explain that, I don't think. I know that it's mentioned to her, or it's mentioned to Linda that she's going to be there. What is she going under? Mrs. Ryan or something?
Yeah.
And it said, well, she's going to be here, so she'll keep you company. So it's not like she tried to make it seem like she wasn't there, but I don't know. It's probably just a little plot hole.
It is. And her son is super creepy. He's actually really good in this film. I actually like him.
Yeah.
He's so creepy, especially the bit where Linda's driving into town and he's kind of going into town at the same time, and he's kind of level with her on a road, on a two-way road. He sort of pulls up beside her and he's making funny faces at her. And
it's very strange.
Kind of really creepy. Yes. Yeah. It is. And it kind of sets him up a little bit, right? Because it makes him, you feel that he's a bit menacing then, but you think he's just a bit weird, or he's just trying to crack onto her or something. Yeah,
we can't really tell at that point if it's just misdirection because there's so many different red dragons, red herrings being planted along the way.
Yeah, there is. It's him following. So there's a scene with Linda and Barney, and they go for a swim in the in the pond or wherever it is. And then they go for a walk, and they're in the cemetery, and they're wandering around the cemetery, and there's this old area with old building equipment and stuff. They're sort of reminiscing a lot. And she thinks Barney's playing a game with her and is looking at her through the trees, but it's somebody else because Barney's just around the corner.
Right, yeah.
So we would assume, I guess, that it's this guy who's watching them.
I believe so, yeah. I think his name's like Kelvin or something.
Kelvin or something like that, yeah. So he's quite creepy. So those scenes are really good. But like I said, the old people just cracks me up all the time, especially the two guys. The woman that's doing the vacuuming and the two guys trying to watch TV, and he's asked her to cut it out, and he's, oh, she does that all the time. She's always cleaning.
Yeah, and we do have moments where characters are passively watching TV or it's on in the background, and we're getting little snippets of news reports about bodies being discovered. And so I don't really know, or how that plays into the thing going on at Montclair, but I think it's just, again, having some texture, having another little layer of stuff going on in the background is pretty cool.
I think it is, and there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where Linda goes to the diner and she's catching, it's the first time back into town, and she meets up with the guy who owns the diner. I can't remember his name. He knows the family well. Obviously, the family's well known in the area, and he talks to Linda about her mother coming into the diner and having coffee or tea there or whatever she has. And Linda's kind of surprised by that she would go in there. And then at the same time in that scene, there's also on the TV, there's stories about murder going on, about a murder going on, which I think it must be related to Linda's auntie. Has to be.
Yeah, I would guess so. It's never really explained, but
no.
But I do like that it's there, because I like it when movies gives us a little bit of work to do on our own. And not everything is handed to us. Like we still have some questions that when the credits roll, but leaves us with some things to talk about
and stuff you can interpret yourself as well.
Exactly. Yeah,
because they don't give you the answer. Really, they don't say that it was them that murdered those people in the stories you see on the TV.
Right.
So you're just not sure. So that scene's great. I love the scene in the diner as well, where the father's berating his son because he won't eat his dinner or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, come closer so I can hit you.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. The scene I've got, I guess we're talking a bit further in the movie, and when Rita finally comes out, we finally learn that Rita is trying to usurp or kill Linda so she can inherit. And this is where I guess it kind of turns into like a slasher, right? You have these scenes where Rita's telling her that, look, it wasn't her, because it turns out that Rita was sent away to, it sounds like some sort of psychiatric center.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it.
Yeah, and it's kind of left open, or from Rita's point of view, she wasn't the one that needed the psychiatric help. It was her mother that was the issue.
Right.
And her mother had her sent away. She decides that she wants all this, so she's prepared to kill anyone she can find to get this, right? She tells her the whole story. Rita's son turns up, and he starts to try and kill Linda as well. There's that long scene where he's got her pinned on the bed, which is quite creepy as well.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually she sort of she hit him on the head with something, with a hammer or something.
Yeah, it's like a chair or something.
Yeah. She fights him off. Rita comes after her, and there's that great scene where Linda goes into the bathroom, and there's that classic slasher stuff where she comes across the bodies of Connie and Dr. Barton, who obviously knew a lot about what was going on, right? Because there's this whole subplot with them talking about things that have been happening over the years, and obviously they knew about Rita as well as Linda's mother, and were kind of hiding a lot of that from Linda. She only found out a lot of this by looking in those diaries. We get this great scene where Linda's picked up looks like a nail file with a pointy end or something like that in the bathroom to defend herself with, and Rita is looking through the little keyhole and kind of, saying, I'm going to get you, sort of thing. And she gets the little pointy and she sticks it through the keyhole and gets Rita right in the eye.
It's great. It's so great. And it's a cool shot, too, through the keyhole. And we see her eye. And a lot of great eye shots in this movie, too.
There is, actually.
But yeah, just sticking the it's a trick that works purely because of the editing. Because when she sticks that pick through the keyhole and pulls it back and it's bloody, like we know that we don't have to see her on the other side with blood spurting out of her eye. That's all we need.
And this is where we get the shot where she does that Rita falls back or whatever. I don't think she died. I'm not even sure she dies. Does she die later on? I'm trying to remember.
I'm not sure.
As far as I know, the interaction with Rita ends after she's stabbed in the eye.
I think you're right.
And then we get the scene where she throws the door open, and this we get with a classic scene where she runs out of the bathroom and into the hallway, and she leaves the house. And that to me is a great scene. The other scene I guess I haven't written down that I want to talk about was when she sends Barney in to look for the evidence that she's been looking for in regards to the old notes that she found in the doctor's office. And Barney obviously gets murdered off camera. And we get that funny scene where she comes in and then Barney comes out of the room in a wheelchair and just sort of falls into her.
Yeah, it's all in slow motion. And it's very creepy.
Yeah, it's so good. I know we're going all over the place with this film, but I mean, it's, that's what we do. But
yeah.
The other scenes with Barney, I love that scene at the hall when they're having the volunteer fire brigade sort of meeting, and they're planning for some event coming up, and they're all there, and they've got the nice table laid out with all the munchies for after the meeting and all this sort of stuff, and all the guys are in there with beer, listening to the meeting, and she runs in. And it's kind of like no one really notices her. It's really weird.
Yeah. The guy up front, he just keeps talking.
Keeps talking.
Yeah. And the only thing that indicates that he acknowledges her is he makes some off-color remark about something about like if you having an argument with your girlfriend or something, whenever she eventually like pulls Barney out and she's trying to get out of that locked door. But that's about it.
It's interesting because at this point when I first watched the movie, I was actually thinking, and this is where the movie's really good, there was a time where I thought, maybe Barney's involved in this somewhere along the line as well.
I thought so too. Yeah.
So they do a good job of, like you said, throwing out some red herrings into the mix to sort of put you off the main thing.
Yeah.
So I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about was the final scene in the diner. So Linda gets back to the diner after she's escaped Rita and Kelvin, his name is. And Kelvin's such a weird name. I used to go to school with a guy called Kelvin. I always thought it was a weird name anyway. And then Nico's watching over the diner while Harry, his father's, away. I don't know why he's left a kid in charge of the diner, but anyway, whatever.
Sure.
And Linda's just sitting and waiting. So it's like she recognizes that they're going to come after her again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is odd because you think you would ring the police or something. She's building a sugar cube pyramid, a pyramid made of sugar cubes, while there's this juxtaposition of the TV with a ballroom dancing competition in the background, which I think was really quite strange.
It's very fascinating, just visually. I eat it up. I love it.
It's great. And Nico's sitting there. She tells Nico something's going on, and he's sitting there with like a World War II helmet on, like a Marine's helmet or something, and tells him to get the gun. He's got this shotgun and they're waiting for something to happen. And once the car comes in, the car just crashes through the building, just straight into the building. So it's Kelvin in the car, obviously not dead. And Nico has this shotgun and has a shot, and all he manages to do is shoot the Space Invaders machine or whatever it is, and puts a hole in the fuel tank of the van, which is handy for later. But I just like the shot of her building the pyramid out of the sugar cubes, because it kind of builds tension in itself, because you're wondering when she puts that last piece on, what's going to happen, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great technique, and it's something that is established earlier in the film when we're in the diner and we see Harry snacking on sugar cubes, and so we know that that's going to, or it's suggested that's going to come back into play later, which it does, and so it's a nice little payoff. And
it's a great little scene between her and Nico, because she gets near the top and she runs out of sugar cubes, and he just gently passes the bowl over with the sugar cubes in it so she can finish it off. So apparently when they filmed that, they tried all different ways of they tried to stick them together and all this sort of stuff. And it turns out the director was good at building them, so he actually built it.
Oh, cool.
and yeah. So I think I love the way, like I said, I love the way it's sort of like you get the juxtaposition of the ballroom dancing, you get the tension of the building of the pyramid with the cubes, and then the truck comes barreling through the wall. So the guy is obviously out of his head by now and just, crazily wanting to finish her off. But he's kind of stuck in the truck. He can't get out of the truck. Nico has the shots, doesn't do anything. And then it's kind of like Linda's just had enough of everything and just basically takes the shotgun, pretty much goes right up point blank and just blows his head apart.
Yeah, and again, it's we see it happen. We see the head explode, but it's only for a few frames, and so I think that's also very effective. We just need to know that it happened, and then we're on to what essentially is like a shot from like the very first shot of the movie.
Well, it's interesting that the movie kind of opens with the end, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's effectively the beginning of the movie is her starting to get ready to drive away. I think that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
So. It's interesting that it's kind of like closes that out. And then we get to the scene where she's driving down the street and everything sort of explodes in the background. We still don't know what happened to Rita.
We'll get that next of kin too, Yeah. It could happen.
Yeah. And there's a lot of weird things. And there's a lot of little weird things in this movie, like you were sort of pointing out before. There's the scene where Barney has this other woman. I don't know if he's been seeing her or not, and she has like a little convertible car.
Oh, right, with the strange car horn.
Yeah,
or musical car horn.
And there's that scene in the morning where Linda looks out the window, and the car is there being driven away, and the woman that's in it is obviously dead. Remember that scene?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I'd forgotten. Yeah, they don't really go back to that.
They don't really
either.
go into it much. And that's where I also thought on first viewing, I was like, oh, is this Barney doing this? Like, is he involved? Because I really thought he was involved. The first time I watched it, I thought, oh, he's going to be one of these characters that, is her old flame but is actually turned against her in some way and psychotic or something like that.
That's what I thought too.
And there's that shot of the fountain that looks like it's got blood coming out of it. And there's a lot of images.
That's cool, yeah.
It is cool.
And yeah, there's a lot of really cool like practical effects like that and also some cool optical effects that just really sell this. And the surreal quality of the film, the dreamlike, is this real? Is this just in Linda's head? We don't know. And so I like that the movie keeps us guessing for so long.
Do you have any final thoughts on the film?
This is one of those like you just have to buckle in for because you just can't really expect where this is going to go. And like I said, it's a very slow burn, but in a satisfying way, or at least it was for me. It looks amazing. I just can't praise enough these shot compositions, the camera movements. Just from a technical standpoint, it's so impressive, and especially for the time. We have all of that strange, dreamlike imagery and weirdness. Even though we have all that, it still feels pretty grounded. So it's not as like esoteric or as like heady or inaccessible as maybe The Shining could be to some people. And so I like that even though there are some loose ends that we talked about, there aren't too many that it's distracting and, that takes you out of the film. But no, overall, I think this is a solid watch. I had a great time with it.
Yeah, I pretty much echo all those thoughts. It's one of my, actually, out of all the Ozploitation films I own, it's probably one of my favorites. I really enjoy it. Maybe because it is so different to a lot of them in regards to the cinematography and the atmosphere and the way it does play with you a little bit, like you're saying, it gives you that feel of like a ghost story in some places, and then obviously it's a murder mystery as well, and there's some quirky characters, there's some weird stuff going on, there's some strange funny stuff goes on. It's got a bit of everything, and it is quite different from a lot of the movies that we've covered and a lot of the movies we will cover in regards to that,
Yeah. Well, one thing that is also so effective about it is that it puts us, the audience, so close to Linda that we're experiencing a lot of these things that are happening to her. And so even though her aunt is playing these cat and mouse games with her. I mean, the movie is playing cat and mouse games with us. There's so much misdirection at play that we're along for the same ride as she is. And I really like that, where we're fastened in the seat right next to her. We're experiencing all these things and doubting what's real and what's not. And it's just that's really good storytelling.
Like I said, one of my favorites. And if you get a chance to watch it, whether it's on Shudder or you stick your neck out, go and grab the Blu-ray and watch it, because I think there's a lot of good extras on the Blu-ray as well, which I've watched a while ago, and definitely worth a look, and a very, very fun, enjoyable movie. Cool. So what's happening in Brandon's world at the moment?
Oh, gosh. What is happening? Oh,
besides being super busy with work.
Yeah, super busy with work. I've got 3 weeks of school left, so I'm a little crazy with that. But we have an episode on Varicon Video covering The Prestige by Christopher Nolan, which should be out probably by the time this episode of yours is out. And we'll have some stuff coming to Patreon very soon. The Gory Picture Show, we don't have anything planned just yet. But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on with us over in podcast land.
All right, so thank you so much for joining me, Brandon. It's really good to have you again, and I'm sure we'll do this again with another movie eventually.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Had a great time, as always.
It was great. And when we return, we'll talk about what's coming up next.
And now, preview time. When it comes to entertainment, you can't beat a good film. So let's take a look at what's coming your way.
Welcome to Terra's new dead end.
The first phase is hallucinogenic. The second phase is glandular. The third phase is...
Body melt.
He was one healthy dude. Unnaturally healthy. Now, I'm talking new drugs here, right? I'm talking 90s, man. Cognition enhancers. Designed to take your mind into new intra-phenomenological dimensions.
In Sleepy Pebbles Court, something deadly is happening.
All Matthews, target number 1.
One by one,
Nubo family.
they're dying.
Now system and mineral too.
Be prepared,
Cheryl and Brian ran positive pregnancy.
because nothing can prepare you for the horror,
Up until their birth, babies are the ultimate parasite.
the madness,
Something is wrong.
the fury.
What is this?
A new age of human potential has dawned. Body melt. Pray they don't visit your street.
Done any good drugs lately?
Next on A Dingo Ate My Movie, I'm joined by Lewis to talk about the crazy, over-the-top body horror comedy Body Melt from 1993. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. Thank you to all my guests who give their time to make this podcast possible, and a special thanks to you for listening. Don't forget, you can follow A Dingo Ate My Movie on social media. We're at Dingo Movie on Twitter, Dingo Movie Pod on Facebook and Instagram, and on the web at dingomoviepod.com. And finally, we love feedback, so please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, or drop me a line at pete@dingomoviepod.com. I take feedback very seriously, and it helps me to improve the show for you and all the other listeners. Once again, thanks for listening, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Dingo Ate My Movie.
Now, when you've all got your hats and your coats and your scarves on, please go straight to the bus outside. Is that clear? Straight to the bus, where you'll be helped aboard by Simon and myself. Don't leave your purse behind here, somebody will take that.